Welcome. Tonight we're going to be talking about Babylon Rising and the First Shall Be Last. And my name is Rob Skiba. I am the co-founder of Kingsgate Media, along with my wife Sheila, that many of you met when you first came in. I am a filmmaker by trade and a researcher by hobby. And I do consider myself to be a researcher, and by that I mean I research that which has been searched by others before me. And I like to say that I'm an inquisitive person. I ask a lot of questions, and apparently I always have been. I visited my family in Massachusetts a few years ago and found my baby book. And my mom kept extensive notes on my early development. And in the section on speech development, she wrote, "He constantly questions everything." And on most unusual phrase that she said that I spoke was, "I just don't believe it." Apparently nothing's changed because I'm pretty much still that way. I do question just about everything I hear, everything I see. I think we have to. My life verse growing up was 2 Timothy 2:15, study to show yourself approved. And I believe the scriptures teach us to be like a good Berean, to search these things out that we see and hear to see whether they be true. And that's what I've done pretty much my entire life. And what I'm going to be presenting tonight is the culmination of about 25 years worth of research that has been kind of scattered over the 25 years, but really focused in the last year and a half. Last year and a half, it's all I've done. From the time I wake up to the time I go to bed is study, study, study the stuff that I'm going to be presenting here this evening. I imagine that there's going to be essentially three responses. I have three different types of people in this audience. There's going to be one group here that's going to say, well, isn't that interesting? And you're going to walk away and that's going to be about it. You're going to just think, wow, that's pretty cool, whatever. You're going to walk away. There's another group here that's going to suggest that I buy stock in tinfoil and get into the hat making business. And then there's a third group here that's going to be like I was growing up. You're going to hear the things that I have to say, and it's going to cause you to question. And you're going to go and search and see if these things be true. You're going to dive into the scriptures to see if what I believe God has shown me is in fact true. You're going to examine history. You're going to watch the evening news and look at current events. And you're going to remember some of the things that I've said. And you're going to search these things out to see whether or not they are true. My hope is that all of you fall into the third category there. Although I do have tinfoil hats at home, so. But hopefully you will all fall in the third category there. My journey essentially began with examining this verse here, Matthew 24:37, where Jesus says, "As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man." I always wondered about that. I mean, in 5th grade, they're telling me I came from monkeys, and I raised my hand in 5th grade and said, if I came from monkeys, why are there still monkeys? And the teachers could never answer my question to my satisfaction, so, well, what's the alternative? I started studying creation science. Anytime you study creation, of course, you have to study the flood, because the flood explains so much about the topography of this planet through catastrophe versus uniformitarianism. But I never really spent a lot of time thinking about it, the last part of that sentence there, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man. How many of you think we're getting pretty close to that being fulfilled? We're in the last days? I definitely think we're in the last days. And so I started to think, well, what differentiates the days of Noah from any other time in human history? I mean, if you look through Matthew 24, where the disciples asked Jesus, what's it going to be like? And he gives this long list of things. Well, there's always been wars. There's always been rumors of wars. There's been pestilence. There's been earthquakes. There's been all the usual signs of the last days all throughout history. So I'm like, well, what's different? You know, and God said, I'm not going to destroy the world with a flood again. So we know it's not going to happen with water. But so what differentiates the days of Noah from any other time in human history? And the only conclusion I could come to is that it was the creation of hybrids. Genesis chapter 6, 1 through 4. Talks about the sons of God coming down to the daughters of men and producing an angel-human hybrid called the Nephilim. That's the only thing that differentiates the days of Noah from any other time in human history. And oh, by the way, when we think about the days of Noah, it's not just the flood. Noah lived for 950 years, 600 years before the flood, and 350 years after the flood. And a lot of weird and strange and interesting things happened. And I would actually say there's two things that differentiate the days of Noah, all 950 years worth of it, from any other time. One would be the creation of hybrids. Two would be the creation of interdimensional portals. And I'll talk about that in a second. What is an interdimensional portal? I call the first one the Genesis 6 experiment, the creation of hybrids. The Genesis 6 experiment essentially is summed up in Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. I've kind of focused right here on verse 4 where it talks about the giants, or Nephilim. That's the Hebrew word Nephilim. Were in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. These are angels, not the sons of Seth. The sons of Seth is a theory that frankly I think is so absurd. I'm not really going to spend much time talking about it, but I know they teach it in seminaries. I think Pastor Mike could probably attest to that. They do teach it in the seminaries today that the sons of God in this passage is the sons of Seth mating with the daughters of Cain. I'm like, well, how do you produce Og of Bashan? He's 15 to 18 feet tall. You know, Goliath, 9 to 12 feet tall, depending on who you read, and the definition of a cubit. Kissing cousins are not going to produce Og of Bashan or Goliath. So something else is going on there. And throughout the other texts, like Job, sons of God are angels. So I don't need to go much farther than that. Something else of note that I discovered is the fact that contrary to what many believe regarding incursions of angels, that is, angels mating with humans, the phrase here and also after that is actually, in Genesis chapter 6, is actually in a pre-flood context. A lot of people like to associate that with the post-flood. While it's true there were giants post-flood, all of Genesis chapter 6 is in a pre-flood context. I don't have time to go into it to show you why. It's in chapter 1 of my book. You can check that out. As well as in that DVD you see right here, the Mount Hermon Roswell connection. I talk a lot about it in that DVD. As well as on my blog, if you're taking notes, BabylonRisingBlog.com/Nephilim. The bottom line is Nephilim were produced as a result of the mixture of species. Angels and humans, as well as animals and humans. The mixture of species is the Genesis 6 experiment. And then I talked about, in chapter 2 of my book, an individual that I call the man of many names. Scripture calls him Nimrod. In the post-flood world, not long after the flood, an individual came along, Nimrod, who decided to build a tower that might reach into heaven. Well, I don't believe it has anything to do with height, personally. God didn't freak out when we built the World Trade Centers. He didn't freak out when we built the Empire State Building. You know, God gets pretty upset about what's happening there. And it says that the top of this tower might reach into heaven. And God says something interesting. He says, now whatever they imagined to do would not be restrained from them. That at least theoretically, whatever they were attempting was possible. So God decided to go down there and disrupt their languages and confound their languages. I believe when it says reach into heaven, it's talking about what we might call today a stargate. A portal, an interdimensional pathway from this world into the heavenly realm. And if you read some of the extra biblical texts, like the book of Joshua, which is referenced, the book of Joshua is actually mentioned several times in our canonized scripture. It says that there were 3 groups that were aligned with Nimrod. One wanted to go in and assault the angels with bows and spears. Another group, they were going to try to kill God, which is reminiscent of Revelation 19:19, where the armies of the world are gathered in the plains of Megiddo to make war with the one coming on the horse, which is the Messiah. Right? And the other group wanted to set up their false gods in the Holy of Holies. And so God clearly was not happy with what they were trying to do, and He confounded their languages. Now, Scripture attests to this, but some of the extra biblical books go into a lot more detail, that the languages went from 1 language to 70 languages. And as a result, everybody was serving under this one man, Nimrod. They all went away talking about the same individual, but now he went by different names. And I cover this pretty extensively in my DVD series, Mythology, The Coming Great Deception. It's also in chapter 2 of my book. These are just some of the names that Nimrod became known by in antiquity. Gilgamesh, Baal, Melkart, Adonis, Dumuzi, Dionysus, Bacchus, Mithra, Orion, Apollo, Tammuz, and Osiris. For the sake of this discussion, I'm going to focus on just a few of them. Gilgamesh, Orion, Apollo, and Osiris. Because I believe each of those names play a part in the latter part of Matthew 24:37 when we're talking about the Son of Man returning. In other words, our day. Why we need to be paying attention to some of these names. How many of you would agree that the beast spoken of in the book of Revelation is the Antichrist? Would you agree that the beast in Revelation is the Antichrist? Yes? Okay. I began to think about the last days, and Jesus said that it's going to be a time that there's never been a time like it before, and there never will be again. It's the most significant time in all of human history. And so I started to think, is God really going to leave us hanging concerning the details about some of these characters like the beast, the Antichrist? Are we really going to have to question who this individual is? Or does God tell us who he is in the Scriptures? I believe God tells us who he is. Because Amos chapter 3 says that he doesn't do anything except that he tells his prophets first, ahead of time. And so for the most significant time in all of human history, that'd be a pretty significant detail to provide for us, I would think. So that's the subtitle of my book, Babylon Rising and the First Shall Be the Last. Let's look at the beast. Let's try to identify the beast. Revelation chapter 17 gives us a lot of descriptions of this beast. It says, the beast that thou sawest, now the angel's describing this image, this creature, this seven-headed beast that John sees. And he's like, what is this all about? So the angel says, the beast that thou sawest was and is not and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. Where does the beast come from? Oh, you mean it doesn't come from the European Union? From the Vatican? From Iran? From Iraq? Kenya? Hawaii? A lot of people out there saying Obama's the Antichrist. It says that the beast comes out of the bottomless pit. I don't know how all these eschatology teachers teaching it's the revived Roman Empire and European Union, like, dude, read Revelation 17. It says the beast comes out of the bottomless pit. And then it goes on to say that the beast that was and is not and yet is. Well, that's interesting because in the beginning of Revelation, Jesus is referred to as what? The one who was and is to come. Here's an antithesis, Antichrist, the one who was and is not and yet is. Interesting. It goes on to describe the seven-headed beast. It says there are 7 kings. Now, throughout Scripture, a lot of times beasts represent kingdoms. In this case, this beast, this Antichrist kingdom has 7 heads. What's the head of a kingdom? A king, right? So that's what the angel says. There are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. He goes on to say, and the beast here's that phrase again, that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is what? Of the 7. So he's one of the 7 heads, this character, and goeth into perdition. The list I'm about to show you, I got from an individual named Peter Goodgame. He had written some pretty amazing things concerning the Antichrist in his book called The Giza Discovery. And you can read that book for free online.